They said I was trespassing on my own lake. The HOA locked the only gate, put up a fence, and called the cops like I was some kind of criminal. But here's what they didn't know. The land under that gate, the one they thought they owned, it was for sale. And I bought it, along with the only key that could open their fence. Now they call me the problem. Funny how that works, right? Hey guys, welcome back to HOA Stories, where I share the craziest things these homeowner associations do, and how I deal with them. My name's Ryan. I live in a quiet lake community in Tennessee. At least, it used to be quiet, until the HOA decided they owned the water. If you've ever dealt with nosy neighbors or power-hungry HOA boards, you already know the type. So before we start, drop a BOOO HOA in the comments, and share this video with anyone who's ever been fined for breathing wrong. Alright, let's get into it. I always started my mornings the same way. Coffee in hand, walking down to the dock behind my house, watching the sun rise over the still water. That lake wasn't just a view to me. It was peace. It was mine. Until one morning, it wasn't. There was a new fence. Tall, silver, ugly as hell. And right in the center, a giant "No trespassing" sign. At first, I thought maybe it was a prank. Some kids from the neighborhood trying to mess around. But then I saw the logo at the bottom of the sign. Lakeview Homeowners Association. I froze. The HOA had fenced off the only path that led to the water behind my house. I could see my dock, just a few feet beyond the locked gate. But the board had decided I wasn't allowed to step onto it anymore. I pulled out my phone and called Debbie, the HOA president. You know the type. Perfect hair, fake smile, loves rules more than people. She answered with that sweet venom voice. Oh, hi, Ryan. I was just about to send out a notice. We've decided to restrict lake access for safety reasons. I asked, safety? Debbie, that's my dock. My property line ends right at the water. She laughed. Actually, Ryan, the HOA owns the access point. You'll need to submit a written request if you'd like to use the lake again. A written request? To touch my own dock? I could feel my blood boiling. Fine, I said. I'll handle it. And I hung up. The next morning, there was a patrol car parked near the gate. 2 officers standing beside it. And Debbie was there too, holding a clipboard, pretending she ran the whole county. She pointed at me as I walked up. There he is. That's the one trespassing on HOA property. The cop looked at me. You Ryan Collins? Yeah, I said. And this is my lake. He looked at the paperwork, looked at Debbie, and sighed. Sir, technically the HOA owns this access path. You'll need to leave for now. I couldn't believe it. They'd actually called the cops. As I walked away, Debbie smiled and said, Next time, read your bylaws. That night, I barely slept. I sat at my desk, reading through every document the HOA ever sent me. That's when I saw it, a land parcel map from the county. And right there, in small faded print, the strip of land between my fence and the lake was not HOA property. It was unclaimed county land. My heart started racing. I called the county clerk the next morning, asked if that strip was for sale. She said, yeah, actually, it's up for small plot acquisition. Nobody's claimed it in years. I smiled so wide I almost laughed into the phone. Ma'am, I said, I'll take it. A few weeks later, the paperwork came through. That strip of land, the one with the HOA's brand new gate on it, was officially mine. And guess what came with it? The legal right to the only key that could open their fence. The day I got that key, I drove straight to the lake. Debbie was there again, this time with 2 board members. She crossed her arms when she saw me. You can't be here, Ryan. Oh, really? I said, jingling the key in my hand. This land, this gate, this key, all mine now. Her face dropped. I unlocked the gate slowly, walked through like I owned the place, because I did, and looked back at her. Call the cops again if you want, I said. but make sure they bring a copy of the deed." She didn't say a word, just stood there, fuming, as the gate clicked shut behind me. And man, the sound of that metal lock felt better than music. That night, I sat on my dock again. The water was calm. The air was quiet. But my phone started blowing up. HOA emails, texts, threats of legal action. They said I'd interfered with community property. They said I'd violated the spirit of the HOA agreement. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone into the lake. Because, for once, they couldn't touch me. I wasn't under their fence anymore. I owned it. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the gate. It was about power. About who gets to say what's yours, and what's not. So here's my question for you. If your HOA locked you out of your own property, would you fight them, or find a way to own them instead? Tell me in the comments, backhand index pointing down. Because this was just the beginning. The next morning, I opened my door and found an envelope taped to it. HOA letterhead. Bold red stamp across the top. Violation notice. I laughed before I even opened it. Inside, it said I was in violation of community harmony for installing an unauthorized structure on HOA property. They meant the fence. The same fence they built. On land that now belonged to me. I couldn't make this up if I tried. I walked down to the lake that afternoon. The air felt different, heavier somehow. Across the water, I saw Debbie and 2 other board members talking in hushed voices. When they noticed me, Debbie shouted, "You can't be here, Ryan. We're filing a report with the city." I just waved. Good luck filing a report against the landowner. Her face turned red, the same shade as her lipstick. You could see the steam rising off her ego. That night, I got an email from the HOA lawyer. The subject line read, "Cease and desist, lake access." The body of the message said I was interfering with common area management and disrupting community unity. They demanded I remove the fence immediately. I replied with a single line, "Happy to comply, once you remove your fence from my land." I never got a response. A few days later, I noticed something weird. A security camera had been installed near the gate, pointing right at my dock. The HOA actually put surveillance on me. I walked up, looked right into the lens, and waved. "Hope you're getting my good side," I said. Then I posted a photo of it online with the caption, "When your HOA thinks they're the FBI." The post blew up. Hundreds of people commenting, sharing their own HOA horror stories. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was everyone's who ever got a letter for the color of their mailbox or the height of their grass. The next board meeting was open to residents. So I showed up. You could hear a pin drop when I walked into that room. Debbie's fake smile appeared instantly. "Oh, Ryan. So glad you could join us," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. I smiled back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. They went through their usual agenda, lawn violations, fence heights, trash bin placement, until finally Debbie said, "Next topic, property dispute at the lake entrance." Everyone turned to look at me. She started reading from her notes. "Ryan Collins has claimed ownership of the access gate area, but according to the HOA's founding charter." I cut her off. The founding charter doesn't override the county records. Then I pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. Inside, the county deed with my name on it. Debbie stared at it, blinking fast. The lawyer leaned forward, whispered something in her ear. She looked furious. "So, you bought the land just to spite us?" she snapped. I leaned back, smirking. "No. I bought the land because you built a fence on it." The whole room went silent. You could see a couple of neighbors trying not to laugh. After that meeting, things got ugly. The HOA sent letters to my insurance company, claiming I was a liability risk. They emailed residents warning them to avoid interaction with me. And someone, I still don't know who, started spreading rumors that I was unstable. All because I bought a 20-foot strip of dirt. I thought about letting it go. But then one night, I heard loud banging outside. I ran out and saw two men taking pictures of my dock. They were from the HOA's maintenance committee. I yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" One of them said, "Documenting unauthorized activity." I laughed. "Buddy, you're standing on private property. That's my land now." He just muttered something under his breath and walked off. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a friend from college. Told him everything. He said, "You've got them trapped. Send them a formal notice of trespass. Make it official." So I did. 3 pages long. Stamped, signed, notarized. It said, "Any HOA representative entering this property will be considered trespassing and subject to legal action." I hand-delivered it to Debbie's mailbox. By sunset, she was at my door. She didn't even knock. Just stood there, glaring at me like I'd stolen her crown. "Ryan, this has gone far enough," she said. "You're dividing this community." I smiled. "No, Debbie. I'm just reminding you that you don't own it." A few days later, something strange happened. The HOA held an emergency vote to amend the community rules. They wanted to redefine property boundaries so they could reclaim the access area. Basically, they wanted to write me out of my own land. But to change the rules, they needed a 2/3 vote. So they went door to door, trying to convince neighbors that I was the bad guy. What they didn't expect was that most of the neighborhood hated them already. People started coming up to me, telling me about ridiculous fines, threats, and meetings that never solved anything. So I did something bold. I printed every one of those HOA complaints and posted them on a public board at the entrance of the community. Title at the top: "The Real HOA Violations." By the next morning, it was the talk of the town. When the board held the vote, it failed miserably. They didn't even get half. Debbie looked like she was about to faint. The lawyer packed up his files quietly and left the room. The power had shifted. For once, they weren't in control. That night, as I sat on my dock again, I felt calm. For the first time in weeks. The lake shimmered under the moonlight. And the gate, the one they used to control, stood still and silent. I held up the key, smiled, and whispered, "Mine." But the story wasn't over. Because the next morning, I found something new on the gate. A giant red sticker that said, "Pending legal review. Do not remove." And below it, a small note from Debbie. "You may have bought the land, but not the HOA's patience." I laughed. "Oh, Debbie, you have no idea what's coming next. So tell me, if your HOA tried to rewrite the rules just to beat you, would you play by their game, or burn the rulebook entirely? Comment below." The morning after that red sticker appeared, I felt something shift in the air. It wasn't just about property anymore. It was about power. And Debbie wasn't used to losing it. I walked outside to grab my mail. But half of it was missing. A neighbor, Tom, called out from across the street. "Hey, Ryan, you might want to check the trash can near the clubhouse. I think your mail's in there." Sure enough, there it was, soaked in coffee, crumpled up with fast food wrappers. Utility bills. County letters. Even a notice from the tax office. It was obvious who'd done it. The HOA had started playing dirty. I took photos of everything. Every piece of ruined mail, every footprint near my box. Then I sent it straight to my lawyer. He replied 5 minutes later. "Keep documenting. Don't engage." But that was easier said than done. Because that same evening, I heard a loud clang near the lake. I ran outside with a flashlight. And there they were, 2 men wearing reflective vests with HOA maintenance stitched on the back. They were cutting the lock on my gate. "Hey!" I shouted. "Step away from that fence." One of them turned, startled. "Just following orders, sir. Debbie said the structure is under review." "Under review?" I said, walking closer. "You mean trespassing?" They froze. I took out my phone, started recording. "Keep going," I said. "Let's make this viral." They packed up and left within seconds. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. The video I posted had hit 200,000 views overnight. Comments flooded in. Bro just ended the HOA boss battle. Debbie's about to call the FBI now face with tears of joy. Fight back, man, we're all rooting for you. For the first time, I realized how big this had gotten. People weren't just watching, they were invested. That's when things escalated again. The HOA sent out a community-wide email titled, "Safety Concerns Regarding Resident Behavior." They accused me of harassment, public disturbance, and creating unsafe conditions near the lake. They even attached a screenshot of my viral video, the one where I told the maintenance guys to leave. But here's the part that made me laugh the hardest. They blurred their own faces, like they were the victims. Later that day, I was out mowing my lawn when a black SUV pulled up. A man stepped out, wearing sunglasses and holding a clipboard. He introduced himself as Mark, HOA Compliance Investigator. Compliance Investigator? Sounded more like a bad TV show. He said, "Mr. Collins, we've received reports of aggressive behavior and vandalism. I need to take photos of your property." I said, "You can take photos from the street. That's public. Step 1 foot past that mailbox, and you'll be trespassing." He smirked. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "That's the law." He took a couple of quick photos, then left without another word. I knew what they were doing. They were trying to provoke me, make me snap, get something they could use against me. That night, I sat at my desk again. Stacks of letters, emails, HOA memos piled around me like battle trophies. I opened my laptop and began writing something new. Not a complaint. Not a response. A formal petition to dissolve the HOA. I'd read about it online. If enough residents voted, the entire association could be shut down. I just needed signatures. So I printed 50 copies and started walking door to door the next morning. First stop was Mrs. Henderson, the sweet old lady who always baked cookies for the block parties. She opened the door with a nervous smile. "Oh, Ryan, I saw what they did to your fence. It's ridiculous." I handed her the petition. She read it quietly, then nodded. About time someone stood up to them. Signature number 1. Next was Tom, my neighbor who'd tipped me off about the mail. He didn't even let me finish. "Where do I sign?" By the end of the day, I had 20 signatures. By the end of the week, over 40. Half the neighborhood was fed up. Then, on Friday evening, I got a letter slipped under my door. No envelope, no signature. Just a single sentence. "Stop what you're doing before someone gets hurt." I stared at it for a long time. The handwriting was messy, but familiar. "Debbie." I called my lawyer again. He said, "Document it. Do not confront. Let's make it part of the record." But deep down, I wanted to confront her so bad. I wanted to look her in the eye and ask, how did a community meant for peace turn into this? A couple of nights later, I found my dock vandalized. Spray paint across the boards. Rule breaker. It wasn't even clever, just desperate. I recorded everything again. Uploaded it with the caption, "HOA losing their minds. Now vandalizing private property." That one hit 500,000 views in 2 days. People started sending me donations, offering legal advice, sharing HOA stories from all over the country. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement. But I knew Debbie wouldn't go quietly. The next board meeting was pure chaos. Residents showed up in record numbers. Some brought printed screenshots of my viral posts. Others waved their HOA fines in the air like protest signs. Debbie tried to regain control. "Everyone, please. This meeting is to discuss safety concerns, not." Tom shouted from the back. "Safety concerns? Like cutting people's locks at night." The room erupted in laughter and shouting. For the first time, Debbie looked small, cornered. When she tried to adjourn the meeting, people refused to leave. They demanded a vote, right there and then. It wasn't official, but symbolic. Out of 60 people in that room, 53 raised their hands to support dissolving the HOA. That look on Debbie's face. Priceless. After the meeting, She stormed past me in the parking lot. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed. I smiled. "I don't have to win, Debbie. I just have to outlast you." She leaned closer. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Then she got into her car and sped off. Her taillights disappeared down the road. But her words stayed in my head all night. 2 days later, I found a city notice pinned to my door. It said, "Inspection scheduled due to anonymous complaint of unpermitted dock modifications." Anonymous. Yeah, right. They were trying to use the city against me now. Fine. Let them. Because what Debbie didn't know was that I'd already filed my own report. A harassment claim, backed by dozens of residents and hours of footage. I was done playing defense. That night, I stood by the gate again. The same gate that started it all. Wind rustled the trees. The metal lock shimmered under the porch light. I thought about everything they'd done. The letters, the lies, the threats. And I realized something. People like Debbie don't fight for fairness. They fight for control. And when they lose control, they burn everything. So I pulled out my phone and hit record. I looked into the camera and said, "This is what happens when you give the wrong people power. They build fences, then walls, then they call the cops when you climb over." I uploaded it and went to bed. By morning, it had over 1 million views. So here's what I want to know. If your HOA started crossing every line just to break you, would you keep playing nice? Or would you finally show them what happens when you stop? Tell me in the comments, backhand index pointing down. The morning after my last video hit 1 million views, I woke up to a different kind of silence. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that warns you something is coming. Even the birds weren't chirping that day. I walked outside to grab my paper and froze. The entire HOA notice board near the mailbox had been ripped clean off its posts. Just gone. In its place was a single handwritten note, duct-taped to a tree. "We know what you did." I stood there, staring at it for a long minute, trying to process whether it was a threat or a confession. When I checked my security footage later, the truth made my stomach twist. At 2:43 a.m., 2 people, both wearing dark hoodies, flashlights in hand, walked up to the board. One of them ripped it down. The other looked directly into my camera and smiled. Even through the low light, I recognized that smirk. Debbie. She wasn't hiding anymore. My lawyer said we could file for a restraining order. But I wanted something bigger, something permanent. I wanted the truth about this HOA. So I started digging. Literally. I went through old county records, tax reports, and property maps. Turns out, our HOA wasn't as official as everyone thought. They had registered as a private homeowners trust, not a full legal association, which meant their bylaws weren't binding under county property law. In other words, they'd been collecting fees illegally for years. When I found that document, I sat back in my chair and whispered, "Oh my God, Debbie's been running a fake HOA. No wonder she was so desperate to shut me up." I printed everything, stuffed it into a folder, and made 3 copies. 1 for my lawyer, 1 for the county office, and 1 locked in my safe. Later that day, I drove to meet my lawyer, Mark. He looked over the papers, flipping pages slowly. Then he leaned back and said, "Ryan, this isn't just fraud. It's racketeering. If this is proven, she could lose everything." For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally ahead. But then Mark looked at me and said something that chilled me. "You need to be careful. People like this, they don't go down quietly." That night, it rained hard, thunder rolling across the lake. Around 11 p.m., my motion sensor light went off. I looked out the window, and there was someone standing near my dock. I couldn't see their face, just a hooded shape, holding a flashlight. I grabbed my phone and hit record. "Hey, you're on camera," I shouted through the window. They didn't move. Then slowly, they turned the flashlight off and walked away into the dark. I stood there frozen, heart pounding. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was intimidation. The next morning, I found muddy footprints leading from the dock to my back porch. And on the porch table, a piece of paper, soaked but still readable. It said, "If you keep digging, you'll regret it." I sent the footage and letter to the sheriff's office. They opened a formal investigation. But without clear faces, they couldn't make any arrests. Debbie, of course, denied everything. She even held a community meeting the next night, claiming my videos were hurting property values and spreading misinformation. But when she tried to hand out new fine letters, people refused to take them. One resident shouted, "Ryan showed us the paperwork, Debbie. You're not even legal." That was the first time I'd ever seen her speechless. By the end of that week, half the neighborhood had stopped paying dues. The HOA funds started drying up. And Debbie, she started unraveling. Every day, I saw her pacing near the clubhouse, yelling on her phone. Her once perfect hair always a mess, eyes darting around like she was being watched. Maybe she was. Because I'd given all my footage, every trespass, every threat, to the local news station. They called me the next morning. "Ryan, this could be the biggest HOA scandal we've seen in this county." When the news aired that night, I sat in my living room, lights off, watching it unfold. Drone shots of the neighborhood. Clips from my viral videos. Sound bites of residents saying, "She fined me for a lawn chair. She told me my shutters were too shiny." And then the anchor said it. Documents suggest the HOA may not be legally recognized under county property law. My phone blew up instantly. Messages from neighbors, friends, even strangers saying, "Bro, you just took down an empire." But victory didn't feel like victory yet. Because around midnight, my doorbell rang. I opened it. Nobody there. Just a single box sitting on my porch. No label. No return address. Inside was an old HOA binder, thick and dusty. And on the first page, written in blue ink, "You think you found everything? Look deeper." No signature. But there was something else. A faded photo tucked behind the cover. It showed the lake, but from decades ago. And in the background, construction equipment digging near the same area where my dock now stood. Someone had circled that spot in red marker. I flipped through the rest of the binder. Meeting notes, financial statements, maps, and one line that caught my eye. Lake restoration project suspended indefinitely after discovery. Record sealed by board vote. Discovery. What discovery? I checked the date, 1998. This was long before Debbie ever became president. Whatever happened back then? It was big enough to bury, literally. The next morning, I went down to the lake with a shovel. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just followed instinct. About 15 feet from the end of the dock, near where the soil dipped slightly, I started digging. The ground was soft, muddy. Every few inches, the shovel made a hollow clank. I cleared more dirt, and then I saw it. A piece of metal. Rusty but solid. I brushed the mud away and realized it wasn't a pipe or debris. It was a lid. Something like a hatch. And stamped across the top, barely visible, were the words, "Property of HOA Storage. Restricted." My heart was racing. I looked around. No one nearby. I pulled harder until the latch gave way. The smell hit me first, old musty air that had been sealed for years. Inside, there were plastic containers wrapped in tarp. And inside those, stacks of papers and photos. Waterlogged, faded, but still readable. Blueprints of the lake property. Receipts. Bank transfers. And then, a document titled, "Environmental Hazard Report. Confidential." It detailed a chemical leak from a company that used to own this land before it became residential. The HOA at that time had discovered the contamination but decided to privately manage the situation instead of reporting it to the county. Meaning, they built over a contaminated lake and hid it. I stumbled back, shaking my head. All this time, Debbie wasn't just protecting power. She was protecting a secret buried under our homes. I grabbed as many papers as I could and took photos on my phone. Then sealed the hatch again before anyone saw me. That night, I sent everything to the reporter who'd aired my story. Within hours, she texted back. Ryan, this changes everything. They'd done it deliberately. They'd flooded a decommissioned waste pit and called it a lake. That night, I met with the reporter again, Marissa. We sat in her car by the closed-off Lake Road. She was shaking her head as she flipped through the evidence. This isn't just an HOA scandal, Ryan, she said quietly. This is corporate fraud and environmental crime. This could go federal. She leaned in. And Debbie knew. I nodded. She wasn't protecting herself, she was protecting them. We decided to go public again, but this time carefully. No dramatic titles. No viral hooks. Just the truth. Marissa planned to break the story that weekend, with my footage, my documents, and county records backing it up. But before that could happen, something else surfaced. On Friday morning, I woke to the sound of helicopters. News vans everywhere. Neighbors in their robes standing in the street. At first, I thought they were here for the press conference. Then I saw the police tape, this time around the woods near the lake. Someone had found a body. They didn't confirm it at first, but I knew. I didn't even need to ask. It was Debbie. The sheriff's deputy later told me they'd found her about 30 yards from where her car was parked. No visible wounds. No sign of a struggle. Toxicology was pending. Could have been an accident, he said. Could have been something else. But I knew better. She didn't just disappear. She was silenced. That night, I sat on my porch, staring at the water reflecting red and blue police lights. The same lake where kids had learned to fish. Where families held picnics. Where I'd once thought I'd retire someday. Now, it felt like staring into a grave. 2 days later, Marissa's report aired live. It wasn't just local, it went national. The headline read, Hidden Waste Site Under Luxury Lake Community, Residents Exposed to Toxic Levels of Contaminants. She laid it all out, the documents, the transfers, the fake HOA structure. Even included aerial shots of the hatch I'd found. They blurred my address, but the world still knew where it happened. And within hours, the state's Environmental Safety Bureau issued an emergency evacuation order for our entire neighborhood. We had 72 hours to leave. Packing my house felt like tearing pages out of a book I hadn't finished. Every photo, every tool, every memory. All tainted now. Neighbors came by to say goodbye. Some angry, some grateful, most just scared. One woman, Mrs. Cooper, grabbed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for telling the truth. We'd still be living on poison if you hadn't." I nodded, but inside, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. The night before the evacuation, I went back to the dock one last time. The lake was still. Quiet. Almost like it was waiting. I shined my flashlight toward the middle. And that's when I saw it. Something metallic, barely sticking out above the surface. I squinted, heart pounding. It looked like another hatch. Smaller than the first, but newer, maybe a backup or containment vault. Part of me screamed to leave it alone. But another part, the same one that started all this, wouldn't let go. I took my rowboat out, careful not to tip it in the dark. When I reached it, I realized it wasn't just a hatch. It was padlocked. Fresh, modern padlock. Someone had sealed it recently. I tried pulling on it, but it didn't budge. So I took out my pocket knife and wedged the blade into the edge. With a sharp snap, the latch cracked open. And a rush of foul, chemical air burst out. I coughed, covering my face. Inside, there was a metal drum, half submerged in sludge. The label, though faded, was still legible. Hazardous Material Disposal, Class C. And on the side, stamped faintly in red, Lakefront Development Partners, Restricted. But there was something else. A plastic bag floating next to it, with papers sealed inside. I pulled it out and opened it on the dock when I got back. Inside were photos of Debbie, standing with 2 men in suits, shaking hands. The caption on the back said, Final Containment Agreement Signed, September 2023. She'd been working with them again, recently. So maybe, she hadn't just been silenced. Maybe she'd tried to cut a new deal. The next morning, before the official evacuation, I handed the photos to the sheriff. He looked grim. These people don't care about fines or jail, Ryan. They care about what gets out. He paused, then added quietly, "You should probably leave the state for a while." I didn't argue. That afternoon, I watched the last moving truck roll out of the neighborhood. The once busy streets were empty, the air heavy with that strange, chemical smell again. Before I left, I placed a small wooden sign at the lake entrance. It read, "Truth always floats back up." Then I drove away. Weeks later, the EPA released their report. The contamination went back decades, involving multiple shell companies. The HOA had acted as a front for corporate waste management, hiding the evidence under community development. But what caught everyone's attention was the last line of the report. Further investigation suggests additional sealed containment units remain unaccounted for. Meaning, what I found wasn't the only one. Now, I live 2 states away. Quiet little town, no HOA, no gates, no rules. But sometimes, when it rains, I still smell that same metallic scent. And I wonder, how many more lakes across this country were built the same way? Because the truth about my lake wasn't just local. It was part of something bigger. And deep down, I know, I've only uncovered the surface. I'll call you tomorrow. We need to verify this before it goes public. But I didn't get to sleep that night. Because at 2:17 a.m., my security alarm went off. Motion detected at the back gate. I opened my camera feed and froze. A car's headlights flashed across the lake. And a figure, wearing that same dark hoodie, was walking toward my dock again. Only this time, they weren't alone. There were 2 more behind them, each carrying something heavy. Buckets. And then it clicked. They weren't just here to threaten me. They were here to destroy evidence. I ran outside, yelling, "Hey, you're on camera. Step away." They turned toward me for half a second, and then tossed the buckets into the water. I heard the splash, saw the ripple, and then they sprinted toward the woods. By the time I reached the shore, the water was cloudy, murky, like something had been poured in. I grabbed my phone, shaking, and started filming. "This is what they're doing," I said, breathing hard. "They're trying to erase everything." By morning, my video had another 1,000,000 views. And for the first time, the county health department stepped in. They sent a full investigation team to test the lake water. Debbie was nowhere to be seen that day. But her car. It was parked near the edge of the woods, with her phone still inside. And just like that, she was gone. So maybe she was right. I really didn't know who I was messing with. But now, I was about to find out. The next few days felt like living inside a true crime documentary. Except I wasn't watching it. I was in it. The sheriff's office had officially listed Debbie as missing. Her car still parked at the trailhead, doors unlocked, phone on the seat, keys still dangling from the ignition. No signs of struggle. No footprints past the tree line. Just gone. The county sealed off the lake while environmental crews ran tests. Bright yellow tape across the dock. Signs that read, "Hazard. Do not enter water." Every time I looked out my window, I felt a mix of guilt and dread. I hadn't meant for it to go this far. But part of me knew. Whatever they found in that water wasn't new. It had been there long before I ever started digging. By day 3, reporters were camped near my driveway. Microphones, cameras, lights. They wanted quotes, updates, emotions. One asked, "Ryan, do you think the HOA's disappearance is connected to the contamination?" I didn't answer, because deep down, I already suspected the answer was yes. That night, I decided to go through the digital copies I'd made from the hidden hatch files. Most were financials, shady transfers from a company called Lakefront Development Partners. But one file stood out. It was a scanned letter, never mailed. To County Health Department. Regarding incident at Parcel 18A, the substance is not to be disturbed. Pending disposal instructions from corporate office. Containment priority is community stability. Signed, HOA Board, 1998. Community stability. They hadn't protected people. They'd protected profits. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. I wanted to know what Parcel 18A was. The clerk typed for a while, squinting at the screen. Then she said, "That section isn't on our current map. Looks like it was decommissioned before the development." I leaned closer. "Can I see the old record?" She hesitated, then printed something out, a faded map of the area before the lake existed. And that's when I saw it. Where the lake now sits, there used to be a waste treatment facility. The company that owned it, Lakefront Development Partners, the same one on those secret HOA transfers. My heart sank. They hadn't accidentally built homes over contaminated land. It's been 6 months since I left the lake. 6 months since I walked away from everything I thought I knew about community living. But you don't really walk away from something like that. You just carry it differently. Every sound of sprinklers at night, every neighborhood sign that says, "Homeowners welcome," still makes my stomach twist. I was living in a small rented cabin now, middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees instead of fences. No HOA meetings. No bylaws. No petty notes about mailbox paint. Just quiet. And yet, one evening, as I sat on the porch watching the rain, the quiet ended. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. But something, instinct maybe, made me answer. A woman's voice came through. "Come. Steady, Mr. Collins. My name's Dana. I used to work for Lakefront Development Partners." I froze. She continued, "I saw your interviews. I know what happened at the lake. And I think you deserve to know, it's not over." We talked for almost an hour. Turns out, Dana had been a records analyst for the company. Her job was to manage closure reports, documents showing when industrial sites were safely decommissioned. But the more she looked into it, the less sense things made. Some of those lakes, she said, were never meant for public access. They were containment zones. The HOA fronts were designed to keep civilians away from those areas, not invite them in. My pulse quickened. How many sites are we talking about? She hesitated. 17. Across 4 states. 17 hidden lakes, all poisoned. Dana sent me proof, confidential memos, disposal logs, and a list of site codes. Every one of them disguised under housing projects with smiling names like Cedar Ridge Estates or Silver Springs HOA. I spent nights going through them, one by one. Every file looked the same: new HOA established, quick land purchase, fence built, no trespassing allowed. The pattern was identical. But one site stood out, Crescent Vale, because next to its coordinates was a name I recognized. Debbie L. Harlow. The same Debbie who died at my lake. I called Dana back immediately. Why is her name still showing active on this file? Dana paused. That's the thing. The internal record shows her as a consultant for Crescent Vale. Dated 3 weeks after her death. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Either someone was using her identity, or she was never dead to begin with. The next morning, I drove straight to Crescent Vale. About 3 hours north. Same type of neighborhood, clean lawns, smiling neighbors, everything too perfect. And there it was, another lake. Artificial. Still. With the same cheap black fencing around it. A sign near the entrance read, "Private access, residents only." My stomach turned. I walked the perimeter until I found a service path leading down behind some trees. At the edge of the fence, half hidden by vines, was a utility box. And next to it, a hatch. Same build as mine. Same bolts. Same warning label. My hands shook as I brushed dirt off the sign. Property of Lakefront Development Partners. Hazardous Materials Containment. I knew what this was. But before I could take another step, a voice called out behind me. "Mr. Collins." I turned. Standing there, in a beige trench coat, holding a clipboard, was Debbie. Alive. She looked different. Thinner. Paler. But her eyes, same steel-cold stare. "I told you to stay away from this," she said quietly. My voice barely came out. You're supposed to be dead. She gave a small, bitter smile. Dead is easier than explaining what really happened. I stepped closer. What is this place, Debbie? Another lake. Another cover-up. She sighed. It was supposed to end at yours. But when the story broke, corporate needed a scapegoat. I signed a deal, witness protection, new identity, new job. In exchange, I keep quiet. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you just let them build another one? You let more families move in? She looked away. You think I wanted this? They own everything. The land. The lawyers. Even the regulators. People disappear when they talk. I took out my phone and hit record. I'm done with silence, Debbie. You're going to tell the world. She shook her head. You don't understand, Ryan. They're already watching you. Right then, headlights flashed through the trees, black SUVs rolling down the access road. Corporate security. She whispered. Run. I sprinted back toward my truck, heart pounding. I could hear the gravel crunch behind me, men shouting. I dove into the driver's seat and floored it. The tires screamed against the wet road as I sped through the gates. In my rearview mirror, I saw Debbie standing there in the rain, watching me go. For a second, I thought she might follow. But she didn't move. She just faded back into the fog like she belonged to it. I didn't go home. I went straight to Marissa, the journalist. She'd been digging into the story since it broke, and when I showed her the files Dana sent, plus the footage from Crescent Vale, she didn't even blink. We release everything, she said. Tomorrow morning. No redactions. No deals. When the story hit the air, it exploded. Toxic Lake Network, corporate HOA scheme exposed. Federal agencies swarmed the company offices. The CEOs were subpoenaed. News outlets across the country replayed the footage of those hidden hatches. And at the end of one segment, they showed an image of the Crescent Vale Lake. Yellow tape. Hazmat suits. FBI agents carrying barrels out of the water. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. But it didn't last. Because a week later, Dana called again. They found more sites, she whispered. Not 17. Not even 50. Try hundreds. I rubbed my face, laughing bitterly. So we just opened Pandora's HOA box. She didn't laugh. They'll come after anyone connected to this. Be careful. Then the line went dead. That night, I packed a bag and drove until the sun came up. Ended up in a quiet town near the mountains. Same place I'm talking to you from now. Sometimes, I still dream about the lake. About the reflection of those warning lights in the water. And about Debbie. Standing there in the rain, half in the light, half gone. People ask if I'd do it all again. If I knew how far it would go, how many lives it would touch, how much it would cost me. And the truth is, yeah, I would. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the real monsters aren't in horror movies. They live behind fences and board meetings, holding ballots instead of weapons. So next time your HOA sends you a letter about the color of your grass or the length of your driveway, ask yourself, what are they really trying to keep buried? And remember this. Sometimes justice isn't about winning. It's about making sure the truth doesn't drown. If you've ever fought your HOA, if you've ever stood up when everyone told you to stay quiet, this story's for you. Drop a BOOO thumbs down in the comments. And share this with someone who knows what it feels like to be silenced by power. Because maybe, just maybe, your story's next.